So, Steve, as you said offline, you can outswim a tsunami now, right?
Yeah, indeed. Yes. Doggy paddle away. No, I'm still learning, still practicing once a week, sometimes twice a week. Still trying to work on it.
So, what made you realise in your 30s that you needed to learn to swim?
Because I'm 30 and I can't swim. I live in Australia and I went to Bali last year and there was two small earthquakes and I couldn't swim. And I thought, geez, can you imagine? Worst case scenario. I'd be done for. So I
What's
better.
like if there was like a world catastrophe, right, and you had to swim from Australia somewhere else, like where's the closest place from Perth to swim to?
Well, Perth is the most isolated city in the world. So whatever it is, it's fucking far. It could be Bali. I don't know, man.
Yeah, because so you go towards the earthquake.
Yeah, towards the tsunami. Yeah, into the tsunami. Yeah, I'd be done for, man. But you know what I mean? Swimming, man. You have to. It's like walking or riding a bike, isn't it? You don't even think about those things. So people that can swim, they don't even think about it. They just go and do it. I can't do it, but I'm a little bit better now. Practice makes progress.
I think you'll probably still be better than me, man. Like I was always, like yourself. I was always also the kid that never really properly learned to swim at school. I could be all right. I'm all right in a hotel pool, but I'm like sort of like the middle-aged mother of four. Head out the water to the side, trying to make sure my ears don't get wet. That
Yeah.
sort of stuff. I've
Well,
never been one to like stick my head underwater.
especially with your mobility, you got no chance.
That is true. That is like I've actually signed up for 6 sessions with Michael Goulden, the owner of Integra, the man that runs the RTS courses here, to go through some of my stuff. And to be honest with you, it's both the experience is both life affirming and depressing at the same time. When we actually stopped, because our first session we went onto the table, we started looking at table tests, looked at range of pretty much every joint, looked at where things were, and like he was like, well, your mobility's not bad. This is just what you've got. And we worked on this, probably a few issues with my feet and a few issues with sort of my abduction. But on the whole, I'm probably, my squat actual active range of motion is probably about just past 90, maybe. So like it affirmed that I've been dealt a somewhat bad hand in terms of certainly with the hip. We haven't had a proper test with the shoulder yet, but we've done some testing and it's okay. But the interesting thing as well, like I going into the back squat, my squatting feels fine with a heel wedge. Like I can get a decent squat, but I was starting to feel more and more comfortable with that back squat. I don't know whether it's the bench or whether it's the back squat, but like you ever get it where you've like feel like you've almost injured your pec, like it's like giving you a warning shot to kind of go, you know what, if you're going out your active range here enough, I'm going to punish you eventually. Like if I'm overhead, if I'm in extension, this pec, I think it's supraspinatus, is just like firing up. And it's fine most of the time. But as soon as I get into any of those movements, does not feel happy one bit. So as much as it's starting to feel more comfortable, clearly my body disagrees with me.
Yeah, you got to be careful, man. You got to be careful.
I'm old now, right?
You're past 32, yes. Are you 32?
33, mate. 33.
Yeah, you're past 32, so you are old. Nah, you know what? What's middle-aged? 40 to 60 is middle-aged, so you're still young.
I'll take that. I start to feel more middle-aged now by the day, and I'm only 33.
Yeah,
but we'll see. We'll see after the end of 6 sessions.
That's what happens when you get a desk job. Sitting your ass all
and
day.
that is very true. That brings us on to the topic of the day, right? You want to talk about sleep, and I think this is an interesting one because it's when I moved back from Hong Kong. I put up this perfect, ideal weekly diary. This is when I'm going to study. This is when I'm going to get up. This is what I'm going to do in my evenings. This is when I'm going to have my calls, so on and so forth. And I stuck to it religiously, and my sleep improved, probably the best it's improved in a very, very long time. And then I moved into Guildford, where I am now, and we didn't have Wi-Fi for about 2 weeks. Like we couldn't get it took a few days to settle in, and then we order our Wi-Fi, and the guy couldn't come for 10 days. So we had 10 days with like no real TV, no nothing. And my sleep improved so much when there was nothing I could do. Like there was no distractions. So at 10 o'clock I go to bed because why else wouldn't I go to bed? And then I've started now getting into the business, being like, well, I make a priority that I have a shot of time where I spend time with Ellie, my wife, if anyone's new to the channel. And I get some time when she goes to bed, like 10, half 10, and I'm going, well, I've got that one more thing I could do for the business. I could send a bit more outreach. I could do this. I could do that. And lo and behold, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and I've not gone to bed. And that's become almost a regular occurrence. Yeah. What is it that made you want to talk about sleep today?
Well, it's fresh on my mind. I did a YouTube video a few weeks ago. Nah, you know what? I've always been a good sleeper. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I lost you a little bit, but let's keep going. I'm gonna get my editor to do it.
So I've always been a good sleeper. Yeah? Always been a good sleeper. I fall asleep so easily. And you know what I mean? Not a problem. I don't wake up much. But then I started thinking about it. The amount of caffeine that I drink, 1 or 2 cups a day, sometimes 3. I always snooze as well. I'll always snooze, whether it's 2 minutes or 20 minutes. I'll always snooze. And I'm always rushed in the mornings for my whole life. From school till the age of 33. Yeah? I'm 34 now. So that's a good year of what I implemented. And then I thought, you know what? Nah, I need to get on top of this. Let me just try a few things. So I've cut caffeine for the last 55, 60 odd days. I've had no caffeine. So no coffee, no English breakfast tea. I've had no caffeine. My alcohol exposure has been a lot less as well because I did the 113 days a few months ago. Did I get an improvement on sleep? Maybe, maybe not. I was always a good sleeper, right? But like I said, I'm always snoozing. So maybe I don't have good sleep. Maybe what I think is good isn't optimal, right? You know, like when you ask a client, how's your digestion? They say, yeah, it's good. And then they tell you that they only have a shit once every 2 days. No, that's not good. They think that's good. They think that's normal, but it's fucking not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been doing nasal only breathing, journaling, and no caffeine for the last 60 days. And oh my goodness, my productivity in the morning is crazy. My energy is crazy. My focus is crazy. And I don't fucking snooze. I'm just like, bang, wake up straight away. It's crazy. And I'm dreaming every single fucking night. I'm having these crazy vivid dreams.
That's interesting. So what do you think it was the caffeine was the biggest kick to actually improve this, like out of the two?
I don't know. Like, you know what? I enjoy caffeine. It's healthy for us. I don't use it too much. But the reality is, it's a stimulant. It's still a drug. And I think, you know, I always tell people, I heard this off a podcast, you don't never truly understand your relationship with caffeine until you try to give it up. And I think that with everything, whether it's alcohol, caffeine, whatever, you know what I mean? You never truly understand your relationship until you try to cut it out and come off it. And for me, that was true because I'm like, whatever, 1 or 2 coffees, no problem. Have it in the morning, might have it just before I train, sometimes at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. I can even have it late in the evening, which I don't do. But if I'm out at a friend's, they offer me a coffee, I'll have a coffee. I still fall asleep fine. But as we know, it's still going to impact your deep sleep and your sleep quality, regardless of whether you fall asleep or not, innit? So I've cut
That's
it out.
something that people don't think about, though, right? Because, like, even myself, to a degree, as much of that knowing about this stuff, is that if I can get to sleep, like I'm not you, I could have a coffee and I could fall asleep straight away. But people don't think about the quality of that sleep. It's like, oh, I got to sleep and I did 8 hours, but how good was that 8 hours? And I think for me, like, the thing I find difficult about giving up, like, isn't actually, and maybe it is, maybe this is just excuses, but isn't actually the need for caffeine. It's not like these big caffeine withdrawals. But I think coffee and caffeine in general is such an interesting drug because it's so hardwired into our normal day in our society. More so than alcohol. Like, you can say, oh, I go out that once or twice a week to cut down on alcohol. But for me, coffee is like if I wanted a break from work, I would go out and get coffee. Right. So now I've got to replace that. Like, what do I do when I want to sit somewhere, work on stuff, but not when I was in the gym?
Yeah, it's. I love the culture of coffee. You know what I mean? Like, go out, grab a coffee with your mate, or you know what I mean. The culture side of it, the social side of it, is incredible. You know what I mean? And what you're saying there, go out, grab a coffee, whatever in it, it's nothing. But the reality is, you know, the caffeine, there's a half life to that, and it stays in your system for about 6-7 hours. So imagine drinking a cup of coffee at 12 o'clock, and then at 6 p.m., half of that cup of coffee is in your system. At midnight, a quarter of that coffee is in your system. Imagine if you have a coffee at 6 p.m., half of that coffee is in your system at midnight, a quarter of that caffeine is still in your system at 6 a.m. And then you have another coffee. Does the residual effect build up? I don't know. But does it build up over time? Is it always in our system? I don't know. Interesting.
And I think for me, it probably is. One of the things I've like been thinking recently is like, while there's not as much that there is in a coffee, I'd drink a couple of Coke Zeros in an evening. And again, that's just like, while it might not be as caffeinated as having a coffee at 11 o'clock at night, it's still that thing that's affecting my sleep, probably to the point where it's not as good quality as it used to be. And now times that by the fact that I'm going to bed later than I should be, is you are seeing this sort of shitstorm where I'm finding it much harder to get myself going in the morning now than I used to.
Really?
And like, almost, again, I'm a big believer in that saying, if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, from Robert Sapolsky. But we had Blake West come and talk to our SMU students the other day about metabolic resistance, and he talked about cortisol being the master switch and the signs of sort of low cortisol in the morning. And as opposed to high, because for people that don't know, we're supposed to have high cortisol in the morning to get us up and wake us up, and it should taper off into the evening to allow us to wind down. But I certainly could see a number of those things on the list and go tick, 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 of just not having high cortisol in the morning. And I can start to see that process. Like, if I keep going down this path, this is going to start switching, and I need to pay more attention to this. Like, going into the social aspects of coffee, like, what did you do to sort of work around that? Because I'm sure people still ask you to go for a coffee. I'm sure you should have the urge to go for a coffee. Do you have decaf? Do you do something else? Like, how have you got through that for the last 60 days?
So I'll tell you the backstory. So before, 60 days, right, is what I've done so far. And I haven't had any decafs or anything. But I did it before that as well. I started before that. And I got 2-3 weeks in and I was having decafs. And then, so only just having decafs, one a day. And then my missus said to me, "Oh, you're still having decaf?" And I said, "Yeah, but I'm not having any caffeine." And she said, "Yeah, but it's the same thing, like whatever, like it's just you're cheating, you're not doing it properly." I was like, "All right, fuck you, I'm gonna do it properly." So from that point, I haven't had any caffeine, not even a decaf. I think there's a little bit of caffeine still in decafs. I'm not too sure how much, but I think there's still a little bit, but it's negligible. And I thought, I'll go, you know what, let's do you one over. I'm not even going to have an English tea. Every night after dinner for my whole life, I've always had a cup of English breakfast tea. I haven't done it. I ain't done it. It's unbelievable. But going back to your question, mate, I'm just like, I just don't have it. And I can't face buying a herbal tea out for like $5, $4, $5, $6. I can't face it because it's just a tea bag and hot water. I won't do it. So I just get a juice instead. And I drink more water now, you know what I mean? And yeah, that's what I do. I just have a juice.
That's the big thing about going caffeine free that people don't think is how much money they'd save. Like, going into a Starbucks, you're paying like £3-4 for a coffee. You do that once or twice a day. Like, imagine that over a month. Imagine over a year.
Yeah, it's a lot.
The disposable income you potentially have.
Definitely over $1,000, like easily over $1,000. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Easily.
So, easily over $1,000. And that's a lot of money, man. Go on holiday for that, you know what I'm saying?
But, so for the people, go on.
No, I was just going to say, but giving it up, I don't know if I'm ever going to have it again.
Interesting. For the people who are like thinking, well, I like my coffee, and I like we were, I fall asleep absolutely fine. Like, what impact from the stuff that you've looked at, read, studied, does sleep have on everything from training, fat loss, the works?
You just broke up a little bit there. Sorry.
I'll say it again. Hold on. I'll give it a little bit of a pause. So from everything that sort of like you've read, studied, researched in your degree, all that sort of stuff, like for people out there that are maybe thinking like, well, I sleep absolutely fine, like us, right? I can have a coffee and go straight to bed. What impact does sleep have, in your opinion, on everything? You mentioned productivity, but let's go into sort of training and fat loss stuff.
You just broke up right at the point of asking that question, but I'm gonna guess what you said. Why should people give up coffee?
No, it was
You're gonna have to edit this, you know that.
I know, it's really frustrating. So how much? Where did you get? I'll ask it again. Did you go? You lose me again? You got me. Yeah. So, for people that say like I sleep absolutely fine, but I have a coffee, I go to bed. I'm not that fussed about being super productive, but they're into their training. From the stuff that you studied, researched, looked at with your degree, like what impact does sleep have on all of our strength training stuff, fat loss stuff, that sort of thing?
So we all know sleep is good for us, but you wouldn't believe the importance of it. Like it's just a different level. When you think of some of the long-term effects that it has if you're not sleeping properly, and how they can just build up and get you, whether it's Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease. One bad night's sleep can increase your anxiety by up to 30%. By 30%, one bad night's sleep. Can you imagine if you have a few bad days of sleep? You're done for. Or if you're someone who is susceptible to anxiety or depression or, overwhelm, you're fucked if you have one bad night's sleep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'll just finish that. We train, we want to build muscle, sport performance, fat loss. Mate, you have to sleep. Yeah, that has to be number one for me. Has to be number one.
That's a mental statistic in terms of anxiety as well, right? Because people don't coincide that. If they're anxious, they think, what is the circumstance that made me anxious? Rather than like, am I put myself in a scenario where I was more prone to it in the first place? And I've certainly felt this. The more I've been burnt out, the more I've been sleep deprived. I've found myself going through periods of burnout, periods of anxiety, and like not understanding what's happening. Like life isn't that bad. Like, why do I feel so awful? And it could be something literally as simple as that.
Yeah. It's mad because, I think it was 40% of most people across the world have a problem with sleep. And, like what is clinical sleep deprivation is actually 6 hours or less sleep. How many people do you know only get 6 hours? So they could be clinically sleep deprived. You know what I mean? And I reckon it's probably 50% of the population that are that number. You know what I mean? 50% of them are clinically sleep deprived, 6 hours or less.
Yeah, I mean, and say me in this scenario right now, and Stan Efferding was recently on Modern Wisdom, and he spoke about sleep actually being more important for nutrition for hypertrophy.
Interesting.
And I find it hard to argue with that, because you could be in sort of maintenance or slight calorie deficit and hit protein target, train hard, and put on a bit of tissue. If you're getting 2 hours sleep a night, it's very, very, very difficult to really put on any muscle mass.
Yeah, I agree. Sleep has to be the number one thing. It has to be the number one thing. Imagine that 30% increase in anxiety from one bad night's sleep. That's crazy, isn't it? That's like big numbers, man. That's big numbers. Big numbers. Especially when you consider the state of Western society's mental health. You know what I mean? Like suicide rates, depression. You know what I mean? It's crazy what people are struggling with emotionally, mentally. How's your sleep? You know what I mean? You got to work on your sleep. It's really important. One other thing that I found has helped my sleep a lot is trying to wake up on a sleep cycle. So we go through 4 sleep stages every 90 minutes. So I'm trying to work out what time I should set my alarm and wake up so that I'm not too deep into one of those 90-minute cycles. That's what I've been trying to do. and it's working really well.
For people who don't know about these cycles that's listening to this, do you want to kind of give a quick overview on these 90-minute sleep cycles?
Yeah, so basically with your sleep, you have 2 phases, and there's 4, and those 2 phases are non-REM, which is non-rapid eye movement sleep, and REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. So your first 3 phases, your first 4 cycles are stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. That's your non-REM sleep, and then your last stage is your REM sleep. Okay, your non-REM sleep. So the first 3 stages, stage 1 is when you start to fall asleep. That's your light sleep stage. That should take you anywhere between 5 to 20 minutes to fall asleep, or some people like seconds. Stage 2, non-REM sleep, is your deeper light sleep, and that should make up 50% of your overall sleep. That's where your body temperature drops. That's where your heart rate drops. So for you to fall asleep, your body temperature has to drop by, I think it's 2 degrees, which is why it's always easier to fall asleep in a room that's cold than warm. And I've just made this up, this last bit. It's why I like to stick my hand underneath a cold pillow. Is that true?
There could be something in that.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. So that's your deeper light sleep stage, and that should make up 50%. All right, and then your stage 3, which is your last non-REM sleep stage, is your deep sleep. Okay, and that should make up 25%. Okay, and that's where your body is repairing itself. The body, the muscles, the tissues, the ligaments, the tendons, the bones, and the immune system. Okay, so immune function. Okay, and then your last stage of sleep is now that REM sleep, your rapid eye movement sleep. And it's called rapid eye movement sleep because that's what actually happens. Your eyes will horizontally twitch back and forward at a really fast, rapid rate. And what they found is that phase, you're in a state of paralysis. So you can't move. Yeah, you're asleep. But the brain's activity is as high as when you are awake. So there's real sort of brain recovery things happening here. And those last 2 stages are the most important for the brain. But the last stage is where, dreaming occurs, and, where memory consolidation takes place and things like that. So all 4, 90 minutes. Then you go through another phase of it. Then you go through another phase. And I think they get a little bit shorter each time. But 50% light sleep, 25% deep sleep, and 25% REM sleep.
Interesting. And like when we start looking at that, you actually start breaking that down of what happens in each stage, then it's really, really easy to see how much this can impact us.
Yeah.
And this, we've just gone through a worldwide pandemic where we talked about vaccines for 3 years. Whether you are pro or anti-vaccine, that's up to you. But yet no one was talking about sleep, and we had the impact of someone's immune system. And then I add to this fact, right? If you're sleep deprived, you're going to be ramping up potentially more of a stress response. And the more stressed we are, the more we're going to even further dampen our immune system. So we've now got people who potentially are, how many people you said earlier on that were massively sleep deprived, times that by the start we were in a state of world panic during a global pandemic. This was a recipe for disaster. Then we can start to look at brain health, right? How many people struggle with, we mentioned anxiety earlier on, but how many people struggle with memory? How many people struggle to, going back to the coaches listening to this, to hold information when they study? And yet they will stay up late to try and study, realizing that's probably actually the worst thing for you. We can start to piece together here how much of an impact this really, really has. And then that's even put aside how much harder it is going to be to gain tissue.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, before we want to build muscle, lose fat, we've got to work on our health status, whether we're coaches or a client or athlete looking to improve, right? We've got to get the health state, we've got to improve our health. And for me, the number one is that sleep, for all of those reasons that we've just discussed: brain health, emotional balance, physical health. Especially as you get older as well. The amount of people I see that are 60 plus and they've all got terrible, terrible sleep. It's really scary. And, they have Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and so many things. Like if we look at Alzheimer's disease, only 3% of Alzheimer's patients have the genetic predisposition to it. So they have that gene that, genetically they could get Alzheimer's. So the other 97% of those Alzheimer's patients, it's all lifestyle related. And I think the number one thing is sleep. Because every time you sleep, you got the lymphatic system, which a lot of people are aware of. You've got these lymph nodes, and it helps sort of detox the body, cleanse toxins out. But I think it was only 2017, which isn't too long ago. I think it was 2017 that they found that there's something, the same thing in the brain. It helps cleanse the brain, and they call it the glymphatic system. And they reckon that if you're waking up tired and groggy, and you've got a lot of things in place, and you're still waking up tired and groggy, you might not be fully activating and going into like optimizing that glymphatic drainage. So you got to work on your sleep, man. Like, what I mean? I think brain health is the number one thing, man. Because you could be fit and healthy, but you get to 70 and you start losing your memory because you're getting dementia or Alzheimer's, you're fucked.
And that's the scary thing, right? That's a really scary statistic that sort of like 97% of people who have Alzheimer's is lifestyle related. And it's stuff that you could have solved now, where in your 20s, in your 30s, thinking, oh, future Simon will deal with that. Well, future Simon won't even remember to deal with that. That is, while you're willing, able to do that, this is the time to focus on it. That's going to be the trailer, man. That's a terrifying statistic. And you're right. Like, I, not that I would ever want to lose my ability to walk or move. And I think everyone should try and express how much they can when they can in terms of movement and getting strong and seeing what they're capable of. But I don't know. There's a part of the body we take for granted more than the brain. Like, people appreciate how, like, oh, I can move, I can do all this stuff, I've got this mobility, I've got this strength, and a lot of people don't. But how many people hammer stimulants? How many people destroy their, like, not prioritize the sleep, myself included? How many people really just don't think about improving their brain health? Because I did a module with my students on behavior change, and we looked at the impact of dopamine. Right? And like we when we look at dopamine, we think of social media, we think of these quick fixes. But again, like finding that reward center from somewhere might mean, and having that healthy and working might mean that you're less likely to go and crave food and grab things, which makes fat loss easier. Put aside the direct relationship between sleep and fat loss, we can then start to work on some of these neurotransmitter pathways and make sure these are working well. Serotonin helps calm ourselves down and feel happy and pleasure. We talked about that. We talked about potentially gut health being repaired by the brain, which will also impact serotonin. We'll talk about things like GABA. Most people, if you and I'm not saying the Braverman test is exact science, but if you get people on the Braverman test, so many people are deficient in GABA, and you start to look at people's abilities to wind down is massively impaired. If we can actually start improving people's sleep, we might start seeing better diet adherence, better focus, better enjoyment, better life, and then that will lead to something when we're 60, when we're 70. And I'd much rather be the person in the wheelchair telling my grandkids stories than the person walking around trying to find my keys.
GABA is a good one. It's a big one. It's the number one supplement I advise for sleep, especially for people that don't fall asleep well or struggle to stay asleep. It's the number one supplement I give, and it always works for them. Always works.
Was that GABA directly?
Yeah.
That's interesting as well, right? Because a lot of people talk about GABA not passing the blood-brain barrier, and like I supplement a lot of my clients with L-theanine because it's a precursor to GABA. So if you get theanine, bit of magnesium to calm the nervous system down, that'll pass the blood-brain barrier, become GABA. But I have known people get success from GABA directly, and it's hard to tell whether maybe it passes the blood-brain barrier more than you think, or whether that is an element of placebo because they're taking something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, GABA is important, and that's that magnesium threonate is also something that I advise. But the GABA, I've had people take it and it's really, really helped them. So I'm just going to keep promoting it. Both of those two, really. Um,
Mm.
mm, interesting. Sleep's mad, isn't it, when you think about it? Like, especially like shift workers and things like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's mad to think people are doing these jobs that we need them to do. Nurses, for example, doing shift work for 20 years, 30 years, and they're just ruining their own health. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
ruining their health, doing shift work and stuff, it's scary.
I think the pandemic's made that worse, right? Because before, if I was in an office in New York and I wanted someone from the Hong Kong branch or the London branch to have a meeting, I would have to pay, get them to fly out. I'd have 13 whatever the hours are to fly over there, where they couldn't speak to me. They'd have to go find a hotel. They'd sleep for the night, and then they'd come in fresh the day so you have the meeting. Whereas now, I see people put meetings in, like when I was working one-to-one with clients, see people put meetings in people's diaries at 11 o'clock at night. I've seen people send work at midnight and get angry when when it wasn't done by 3 a.m. And whether they generally would like get in serious trouble and fire them, we don't know. But the offices created this culture where you had to be 24 hours a day, around the clock on, and there was nothing more important to that. I was in London. This is even pre-pandemic. I knew someone pushing for corporate lawyer at Latham Watkins, where he didn't sleep for pretty much for 2 weeks. He came home once for a shower, and he basically just stayed on little scraps and naps for in the office because he was given so much work to do, pushing for this sort of promotion, that that became priority number one. And like, while I'm not necessarily against temporarily pushing your sleep back as a priority when there's a big goal, right? That everything that's worth having is a little bit unhealthy. Being the number one football player or rugby player in the world is a little bit unhealthy. Bodybuilding is a little bit unhealthy. But we now foster these environments where, yeah, okay, but when does that stop? This isn't a push for a promotion. This is just how your work life is for 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah, it's I think like I think like yeah, how I think about my work and my business is that one of the first things I try to do is set up boundaries. Like, how do I want my weekends to look? How do I want my nights to look? How do I want my mornings to look? What do I want out of my life? My sleep, my training, my relationships, and then I can build work around that to make it work. The problem is those big jobs in it. They're working for corporations that they can't do that. You know what I mean? And they make the mullah, but it's at cost of their health and their wellness. So those people, that's fine doing that because that's what they love, and some people love working like that and achieving an amazing career and lots of wealth. But those are the ones that have to knuckle down on their training and work on their sleep and know when to push and pull and make sure everything's in balance. Because again, look, shift workers, I think it's about 96-97% of them fail to adapt to the demands of shift work. That's a big percentage. You know what I mean? So I think I think if people were more aware of the impact of poor quality sleep and how it can affect your health short term and long term, because people are aware of what it does to them short term. Let's face it. You wake up tired, moody, groggy, can't focus. You need caffeine to get through your morning. But I don't think people are fully aware of the long term effects of poor quality sleep. If they were aware, I think people would sort their lives out.
I think from a coach perspective of this as well, it's like, how do we get our clients to be receptive to listening to that? Because like, if you lecture them about, look, you could give them that stat about Alzheimer's, and you may convert one person that's scared of that, and that'll probably be someone who has a grandparent or a parent that have gone through it, right? And it'll resonate. But for most of your clients, if me staying up an extra 3 hours adds another zero to my bank balance, right? That to me is going to be more important. Like, okay, you can give me the lecture later. I'm making money. So they're often men, right? That are going to be this thing where they're going to push. Oh, I don't need it. Cool. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Yeah. I've made an extra 200 grand, so I don't really give a crap. And then they'll just try and train harder, which again is counterintuitive. So I think for coaches, if you've got clients like this, it's like, well, one, how do you make them receptive to the message? And two, how do you work on other things? So if they're going to add to that stress cup, I've used that analogy before, right? My coffee cup, ironically, right? If that's close to overflowing, if not that's filled up by bad sleep, then you won't have as much availability to do hard training volume. You won't have as much ability to do cardio. So maybe you do more regular cardio breaks. Maybe you do more regular diet breaks. Maybe you won't go as hard on the training volume. Maybe you won't go as aggressive on the deficit, because you want to keep them in a deficit consistently for long term, but you also want to make sure that we're not overflowing that cup. And then it's also being able to show these clients that there is a consequence of their actions, because most people, we've all seen the person that didn't care about a certain part of the process until something happened, whether that is they got ill, the doctor told them they were getting sick, something made them go, oh shit. We've seen people who got lifestyle diagnoses, they get diseases, and they go, oh my God, I need to change my life. And they change their life around because now it means something. Now it shifts up the priority list. Now, I'm not saying wait until your client gets Alzheimer's to try and get them to fix their sleep. But it's like, well, how do you create that urgency? And this is where I think more coaches should create deadlines around fat loss. Because if you can show with data, hey, look, you were progressing 4 weeks ago. You've gone through a stressful period and your sleep suffered. And look, we're not recovering from the gym anymore. We can see this because your weights are going down and your weight loss has slowed. So what are we doing to improve this target? Showing them that data might be the thing that goes, oh shit, I don't want to get weaker on the bench press. And that could be that little kickstart, that urgency to do something about it, rather than you just telling them all the science of why sleep is good. They're just like, look, if I'm getting stronger and I'm losing fat and I'm making money, like, why do I care? Like, there's nothing to make this valuable to me.
What I always tell people that, like, I mean, I don't work with people that don't want to be better every day. Like they're high performers. They want to be better, whether that's sport or work. I always tell them that if you did work on your sleep and you got 7-8 hours of good quality sleep, but you woke up and you were more productive, 25, 30, 40%, I don't know, make a number up out of thin air. If you were that much more productive, focused, you would achieve more. You would achieve more, because I have done that myself. I've done it. So the more, if you're a coach listening, the more you can actually create the evidence to do that yourself, then you're the evidence for the client as well.
And you want to highlight this as well, right? If you're tracking sleep or whatever, however you're tracking your data, like the amount of sleep or the quality of sleep, if you're tracking if someone's waking up feeling rested, every time if you've got a client that's struggling with sleep, every time they hit a PB after a good night's sleep, bring it up. Every time they say, oh, I woke up feeling super rested today or super productive today, bring it up. If you can highlight, and make them aware, like, this good feeling isn't, I'm just having a good day. If you can correlate that with sleep, they will start putting the pieces together where they're like, oh, okay, if I got my sleep in tune every day, then things will start moving in the right direction. It's like making them aware that this is important, which is probably the hardest barrier. It's like getting clients to do remedial work in the gym, right? You know full well that training someone's lower traps will get them a bigger bench press. But at the same time, that's the bit that everyone skips on at the end of the gym because they don't see the importance of it. But if you can then somehow show them, look, you've been training your lower traps for a couple of weeks. We've added 5 kilos to your bench press. All of a sudden, that client's really excited for the lower trap work. Sleep's sort of the same thing. People know it's beneficial, but people don't prioritize it until they see the reasons why it's working.
Yeah, or it's too late. But this is the thing, though. This is the thing. We all know that we need to sleep 7, 8, 9 hours, whatever it is, and we need deep sleep. Okay, as you age, you might wake up once for a piss or whatever. That's normal. But I'm telling you, if you're a coach listening, you have to do it, because you will be such a better coach. Your retention, your recall, your everything you read and learn, you'll remember it. Your sessions will be better. Your training will be better. Your potential to build muscle mass will just go through the roof. Like, you'll reach your potential faster. and you'll also minimize your injuries because people that sleep less, it's a fact, they get injured more.
Maybe that's we said earlier on about my little pet niggle, my super spinatus niggle. Maybe if I sleep more, it would have not been lingering for so long.
There you go. There you go.
And that's my realization to do this, right? That's my lesson from today.
There you go.
But it's like you're absolutely right. And you mentioned getting up to go for a piss, and I do think when you're old, like as you mentioned, that is weak bladder. But I see a lot of clients have this issue where they're getting up and going for the piss, and they assume it's because they're drinking too much water, and that is rarely the case. So for people listening to this who've got clients who are not in their 70s and 80s that are getting up to go for a piss, you want to start looking at two things. Like, one, are they absorbing the water they're taking in? So maybe looking at supplementing with something like an electrolyte. The second thing is looking at potentially someone's stress response. So when we sleep, we should raise something called growth hormone. People know growth hormone is this thing that bodybuilders take to get like jacked and recover better. But actually, when we look at growth hormone, what it is a nutrient partitioning hormone. So it allows us to prioritize and shift into using fats as we sleep. Because if Steve's going to bed, he ain't going to be eating for 8 hours. So he's going to need to go into fats, which is like low intensity sort of energy fuel source to get him through the night. So his blood sugars don't drop and inevitably kill him if that's the case. Now, if growth hormone doesn't rise, because let's say, for sake of we are overly stressed, overly caffeinated, right? We now at this point where we're still using glucose as a fuel source. We don't shift into using fats as a fuel source. So what happens when we all of a sudden don't have any more food? We have this drop in blood sugar. And then our body's like, oh shit, I want Steve to stay alive. And it releases adrenaline and noradrenaline, which is why a lot of people wake up wired. At that point then, your body's less like, I woke up because I needed to go for a piss. It woke you up because of your blood sugar issues and going, well, while I'm up, I might as well have a piss. So for clients that are like you getting those issues, key things I would say is, first off, is if you want to like put a plaster on it, this won't solve the problem. It's like putting a cork in a leak. It's not going to fix the hole in the wall, but it might like stop the leak long enough for the plumber to get there. Is having some fruit after your evening meal, fruits in the evening, because fructose is primarily used by the liver, and that will mean that you'll have a little bit more of a glucose supply to be readily available, and that might just get you through the night. But the big things then to work on is stress, which could be removing caffeine earlier in the day, which could be working on lifestyle stuff, which could be shutting off the computers before bed, and that comes into another thing. Like we mentioned earlier on, like caffeine. You mentioned nasal breathing, which we haven't properly got into yet, and we've just mentioned potentially like stress management stuff. Other than that, what are some of the big things that you think have either impacted your sleep or your client's sleep that people could give a go?
Alcohol.
So tell us a little bit about alcohol. Why does alcohol have such an impact on our sleep?
Well, what alcohol does, the ethanol in alcohol messes up our sleep by keeping us out of deep sleep, by keeping us in non-REM sleep, our lighter stages of sleep. So it's a sedative. So you might fall asleep, but you're not actually getting into a good quality deep sleep. So, a nightcap isn't actually that good for you. It's a fake sleep. So yeah, alcohol isn't good.
So we've brought down alcohol. We've potentially worked on our stress management, and we've cut out caffeine. Let's say now someone is still struggling with sleep. Where would you go next?
I would, well, I mean, there's a lot of things that we look at, right? Resting heart rate, sleep data, stress management's a big one. But I'd say resting heart rate, blood pressure, that sort of stuff. It's a big one. What is their resting heart rate and what is their blood pressure? And I mean, we can look at HRV, but I'd say blood pressure and resting heart rate is the big ones. Most people that have nice low resting heart rates, they generally sleep. They will always sleep better than people that have higher heart rates. You know what I mean? And what's the gold standard? I like clients to be in the low 60s. If they can get lower than that, even better. I've got some clients that are in 40s, 48,
Yeah.
49 beats per minute when they sleep. That's incredible. But yeah, blood pressure, getting that blood pressure in check, and then making sure that they work on, cardiac efficiency, cardiovascular capacity, and that could be long steady state zone 1, zone 2 cardio. It could be just losing weight. It could
Yeah.
be all of it. It could be nasal only breathing methods when they sleep, when they train, and things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and in like a lot of that is down to the stress response again that we spoke about. It's like how is somebody managing their stress? Because signs that of a real high sort of like sympathetic drive are going to be resting heart rate, high blood pressure, low HRV, but you might not associate that with cardiovascular health, right? Because if I can get someone more aerobically fit, there's a couple of things that happen there. One, we work on our stress response. We allow us to relax our body. It's sort of the yin to our weightlifting yang. But also, we can now start to improve our aerobic health, improve our cellular health, which in turn will improve our ability to utilize fat as a fuel source and release things like growth hormone. So cardio could potentially be a huge one there. I think another one is our light supplies. I think this is the big thing for me that's maybe impacts the quality of my sleep, and why, other than like going to bed early because I had nothing else to do, why not having Wi-Fi was such a game changer for me. Because again, I don't like I think the ancestor argument's overblown, but when we look at our ancestors, we'll see that people got up when the sun came up and they went to bed when the sun came down. But now we're in a perpetual state of daylight. Like I can work until 8, 9 o'clock in the evening, and here is a big softbox. There's a big bunch of light. I've got a laptop, a big monitor here. I've got a laptop screen here. I've got a webcam that has light. I've got my phone in the evening. We have televisions. Like our exposure to blue light affecting our melatonin, affecting our ability to drift off. We may get to sleep, but we're not truly drifting off into that deep sleep because of all this light. Now, we could say to every single one of the people listening to this, going, well, I want you to make sure you don't have any light supplies in the evening, but that's pretty tricky because like the amount of people that relax watching Netflix with their partner, now you're just going to tell them to read a book in the corner in darkness? Yeah. You're not. But if we can start thinking about this and maybe go to bed a little bit earlier to have that wind down time without screens, or at the very least switch to sort of like the flux and these sort of like blue light blocking. I've got a pair of glasses like this that are blue light blocking that at least just, again, it's a bit like the fruit in the evening. It's not solving the problem of the light at the wrong time, but at least it's taking the edge off it. Yeah, and that can just be enough to improve 5-10% of our sleep.
Or even 1%, it all adds up, you know what I mean? But the big one is dimming the lights though, isn't it? You know what I mean? Just getting the lights down, dimming the lights. I mean, putting lamps low on the ground really help as well. So if you've got lamps, put them down low.
And is that because you're not actually seeing it as like, if you look up and I see a light bulb, I'm seeing a much harsher light than if I'm seeing a glow?
It's to do with receptors. I think you have at the bottom of your pupil, you have receptors that sense light that's up high and it comes down, which is why the solar angles affect your melatonin or whatnot and how you're awake. Okay. So the lamp's lower better.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. So you also mentioned nasal breathing early on. That's something you've been doing. So what made you start playing around with that for sleep, and how much of an impact has that had, and why do you think that has an impact?
Well, like I said, I never struggle with sleep, but I thought I would try to, and I don't snore and I don't wake up with a dry mouth. So it's not like I use my mouth to breathe when I sleep, but I thought I would try it. So I would just take my mouth, slept every night, every morning I journaled, sleep score, wrote how I felt, if I woke up groggy, tired, fatigued. But most days I woke up feeling great. When you breathe through your nose, so first of all, I think it's up to 40% of people are mouth breathers. Okay, and that's not good. When you use your nose to breathe, your paranasal sinuses release nitric oxide that helps deliver 20%, up to 20% more oxygen into your body. That's into your lungs, into your muscles, and into your brain. So we should be breathing using our nose. Okay. you'd be surprised how many people I get using nasal only breathing, and I say, I want you to spend the next week thinking about using your nose, and then they come in a week later and be like, I didn't realize I'm doing the gardening and I'm using my mouth, or I'm cooking dinner and I'm using my mouth to breathe. So people ain't aware. So even if it creates awareness, is a good thing. And people that snore, like I said, lots of people have sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea. And there's another type of sleep apnea. I'm not sure what it's called. Sleep apnea and obstructive sleep apnea. Let's call it that. Those two things. But nasal only breathing can reduce the episodes of sleep apnea by up to 50%. So it's worth a try to practice. It's definitely worth a try. But yeah, I've been using it for reasons to help sleep, to improve cardio. So I use it when I do low intensity cardio, like zone 2, zone 3 cardio. If I go over a run, I'll just nasal only breathe. Which makes it harder, but I can work slower at slower paces for longer periods of time and get a really good benefit from it.
There's a bunch of benefits, and you've mentioned a huge amount of them in terms of nasal breathing. And when we start looking at all the nasty stuff you don't think about, all the hairs and the snot and the mucus, because of that, it's almost like resistance training for the diaphragm. There is more obstruction. The air has to work a little bit harder, and we can start looking at the impact of diaphragmatic breathing on things like posture, things like performance, things on parasympathetic sort of drive. These things are massive. And when I used to use nasal strips for a while, and it made a huge difference, because if you can see, and apologies for audio listeners, but if I breathe in through my nose, you see how this one expands and this one goes down, and like this could just be. I've always been a mouth breather ever since I was a kid. There's a big impact from mouth breathers and dental issues, and we all know, like, for people that are new to the channel, these teeth aren't real; these are Bangkok teeth. And my dental appearance, go back 40, 50 episodes ago, and you'll see what my dental appearance used to be like.
That's a smile,
which
bro.
I've had some, I've had some issues that are genetic, unfortunate things that have happened to my teeth. But how much of that may have been down to mouth breathing? It also could have been down to enjoying myself in my 20s with this nostril, right? Like people don't think about that.
Yeah. Do you have a deviated septum?
I've never known for sure, but probably.
Or polyps, I think it's called, polyps or something, where you struggle to breathe through your nose. There's a few things. I only know that from some of my clients.
Yeah, like I've known people have had it, but I've never actually had it looked at, and maybe it's worth it. But I generally think it's weird. Like, when you look at it, if you generally think about when you relax and you take a deep breath in, you're probably more likely to breathe through the nose. This is the simplest way I can think about the impact. We can talk about all these different sciencey bits. When you're stressed, where do you breathe? You breathe through your mouth when you're stressed. It's because you're trying to get as much air in as possible, as quickly as possible, to run or kick a stressor in the dick. So it's chicken and the egg. Is the stressed out breathing pattern causing the mouth breathing, or is the mouth breathing causing a stressed out breathing pattern? It's hard to say, but if I'm like this all the time, naturally, without thinking about it, I'm now going to put myself in a more anxious state. If I put myself in a more anxious state, I'm probably not going to calm down to get enough deep sleep, which puts me in a greater stress because of the poor sleep the next day. So we can start to say again, well, what's the easiest thing to change? Because, and this could be different from all of you, I always think the problem with breathwork studies is like it's trying to piss in the ocean, trying to make it yellow. The awareness, as you said, is huge. But if you're doing thousands and thousands of mouth breaths when you're not paying attention, and 20 good diaphragmatic nasal breathings when you are paying attention, it's not really going to touch the sides. So what can you change? Is it easier to change the stress response? Maybe. Is it easier to change the nasal breathing? Maybe not. But you could go for those nasal strips, which means you might get more breaths than you were without thinking about it, right? You could spend time in the morning and the evening doing it. But again, you need to have that awareness in the day. But I think, like, and there's a take-home lesson for this for people who are trying to improve their sleep. We've listed a bunch of stuff, but what is the thing that you could do consistently now? So could you dim the lights every evening? That's a small change. Could you wear blue light blocking glasses? Could you make the room a bit colder? Like, what are these things that are going to have the biggest impact, which you can do consistently? What's the biggest impact we can make? Because I could have, and this breathing is another conversation of the day, But I can improve hip mobility by improving my rib cage and diaphragm function. Sure. But what's going to be easier to change? Opening up my rec fem and loading it. And because I'm loading it, I probably only need to do 3-4 sets or something. And it can start to make an impact right now. Or doing a breathwork drill, which is probably going to actually be the root cause of the problem. But I'm going to do more bad reps than good reps. Like, this is the stuff that people kind of get lost in the weeds, if that sort of makes sense. I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but with sleep, it's like, what is the thing that's actually going to make an impact right now? And I think for you, it was caffeine. Am I right?
Well, it's hard to say because I did 2 or 3 things, but yeah, I'd say caffeine was the big one. But this is the thing. I want to say caffeine, but it's not like I drank a lot or I drank it late. I drank it at 6 a.m. and maybe 10, 11 a.m. and that was it.
Mm.
But did it
Do you
every
drink
day?
any like diet soda or anything like that?
Nope, nothing.
Because that's my big one. That's why I think about that. Like, when I get a chance to, I sometimes buy because I love a Coke Zero. So I sometimes buy like the caffeine free ones, just just to take the edge off and just see if my sleep's improved. They're not often enough in supermarkets for me to do a proper test. Like, but if I can get a bunch, next time I see them, I might get like 6 packs of them and do a bunch and just go like, is my sleep better? Like, get a bunch of normal Coke Zeros, do 6 weeks of testing it, get a bunch of Coke Zeros caffeine free, and see if my sleep actually improves. Because I'm like you were. I get to sleep fine. I just don't prioritize it enough, and I don't know how well I'm actually sleeping.
But that's what I'm saying. You again with the caffeine or sleep or anything, you never truly understand your relationship with it until you try and give it up. If it's caffeine or whatever, or try and do something, which is why I love doing my small little 100-day challenges because it's got to get me out of my comfort zone. I said I'll do a sleep challenge. I'll do nasal only breathing when I sleep. I'll do cut out some caffeine, alcohol. I've done all different ones, and you learn a lot about yourself. You know how far you can take it, push yourself, and you learn a lot because then you, as a coach, you're going to do a little bit more research and study on the effects or why you're feeling this way. And I just journaled every morning as well. I do my journaling, but just journaled how I felt as well with my sleep subjectively. It's done wonders for me, man. Energy, productivity, focus, all that stuff is just gone.
Nice. So for someone, if someone's been listening to this now, and they've got to end this show, and there's one thing that you would recommend someone do to improve their sleep, what would it be?
One thing. What's the one thing you can do to improve your sleep? I would say, um, it's a hard question, man, because obviously everyone's going to have so many different issues. You know, what I mean, you can have this person could have a high resting heart rate. This person could be doing lots of volume training. This person could be going to bed at midnight. This person could be waking up 3 times a night. So they're all going to have different sort of things. But I would say the biggest carryover to most people is limiting their caffeine exposure.
I think to maybe like, because you're right. There's so many different reasons why someone's sleep could be affected. I think there's one take home message is learn about it. There's a book on my desk there is Why We Sleep, right, by Matthew Walker. And I think if we can learn a little bit about the ramifications and the impact of sleep, like just have some light evening reading, and that might help your sleep itself. Like learning about your sleep, you will find in that book something that hits home to make you go, oh my God, this is important. And that trigger means you will then start to find what is the biggest thing affecting your sleep, whether it's caffeine, whether it's stress, whether it's all these things. Like learning enough that it scares you. Like I'm more motivated to work on my sleep now after you telling me about that Alzheimer's stat. Like that could kick me into gear.
This is the thing. You see, for me, that Alzheimer's stat, it didn't worry me. Like, why did I want to start working on my sleep? I think it was because I said to myself, right, I want to do a little challenge. What can I do? I drink caffeine every day. Let me try and quit caffeine for 100 days. It wasn't even about the health benefit of not having it. It was just a challenge because I have it every day. And I thought to myself, you know what? If we need something every day or most days of the week, that's not good, is it? That's not good. That
Agreed.
we all need like you said earlier about your cortisol, your cortisol stress curve, it gives you energy. It's what wakes you up in the morning. All right. Why are people having caffeine as soon as they wake up or in that first hour? Is it because it tastes good, or is it because we actually need that extra boost to get going? Because if you do, then that's not a good thing, is it? So I want to tell people, I won't, but I want to tell people, until you can wake up perfectly without snoozing, with good energy, fall asleep well, stay asleep, right, and get some good momentum in the morning, achieve things, you're not allowed any caffeine until you can set up until you can produce good energy. All right, then you shouldn't be having any caffeine. That's not going to happen though, is it, for most people? But that's how I feel now. I feel like if I'm going to have caffeine, it's not because I need it in the morning, because I don't need it anymore. Do I want it? Sometimes I do, but you know what I mean? It's psychosomatics, isn't it?
There's a balancing act with that as well, right? Because I in a way, and I don't want to sound like the doomsday police, the fun police, but I do think we've become a little bit too soft as a society now, in the sense of, like you saying, that's like, until you can get good energy, you're not allowed any caffeine. That sounds very similar to Charles Poliquin saying, until you're underneath 10% body fat, you can't have any carbs. But again, I think there's some logic to that. I think a very simple bit of advice and a standard to hold yourself to can be really, really important. I said this on my stories the other day, right? And it's a slight tangent when I come back onto sleep. I can tell the coaches from their social media accounts who don't get results. And it's nothing to do with the amount of social proof. It's often people that have never been in shape themselves, and it's people that demonize anything that are slightly challenging to get results. Oh, you shouldn't ever give up any foods you love. You should make sure all the things you have are in moderation. Yes, you can eat Jaffa cakes and still get in shape. I'm like, yes, you can. But the fact that you've got this sort of like, it's okay, do what you want, no one's going to criticize you sort of attitude to the way you approach your business is the reason why none of your clients are getting in shape. Can you do all of those things you're saying? Yes, but what you're showing me is you're a rent-a-friend. I think sometimes it's the same way with sleep, in that, look, I don't think that's a bad piece of advice. Some people go, well, I enjoy caffeine. Yeah, look, like, I enjoy caffeine. I don't think I have caffeine because I need it for energy. Yeah, like, last couple of weeks when my sleep's not been good, I have found myself grabbing coffee for the energy benefits. But I would say 90% of my year, I don't grab coffee because I'm tired. I grab coffee because it's a habit. I grab coffee because I like to sit in a coffee shop and have a break. I grab coffee because I love the taste of coffee. I grab Coke Zero because I love the taste of Coke Zero. It actually relaxes me sometimes, having something that's slightly sweet and go, right? But I can sit there and tickle my bollocks and go, oh God, that's a nice thing. Like, I can fool myself into this false sense of security. Well, if I want it, I can have it. And it's moderation. Yeah, but just because it's moderation and I like it doesn't mean it ain't fucking my sleep. And it doesn't mean that I don't know the impact this is having on my sleep. So even though I like it, even though I may not need to give it up, I think your rule's not a bad way to think. Because I could look at that and be like, well, I enjoy my coffee, but Steve's right. I don't wake up full of energy. I'm not full of productivity. I don't wake up during the night, but I do wake up during the night. I'm probably not getting as good quality sleep. So, okay, I want this. I will come back to this. But maybe I do deserve that benefit from them. And I think sometimes those harsh truths of, like, is it serving you right now? Like, all alcoholics want alcohol. All cocaine addicts want cocaine. If your advice for them in rehab was have cocaine in moderation, you'd be a bad, like, rehab therapist. We do this with diet. We do this with caffeine. We do this with alcohol when people don't have a serious problem. It's like, well, why can't I have it? Well, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm also not saying that you should start demonizing people that say things like what you just said, because I think you hit bang on the money.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, the amount of people that I work with, and I've told them that I'm not having caffeine. I'm going to do about 100 days or something, because I like the challenge. I like the challenge. And again, like I said, you don't know your relationship with it until you try and cut it out. I fully understand my relationship with it now. A lot of people say, "Oh, I couldn't do that," because I say, "Oh, why don't you try it?" They're like, "Oh, I can't do that. I can't do it." And I'm like, "That's exactly why you should try and do 100 days or 30 days and not have it." Because I don't like, for me, I'm always looking for that 1%. I just want to be better with my health, my fitness, physique, strength, knowledge, everything. I just always have that growth mindset. And for me to say, I can't do that, I need it, I can't deal with that. I can't deal with that. I hate even wanting to say that. So I need to be able to control it. You know, if we feel like we have to control something, it's already too late. I think, you know.
So as a last final message from this show, if anyone's listening and inspired and wants to do 100 days without caffeine, right? After the back of this show, what I want you to do is give it a go. Put 100 days in your diary, start counting them down, start ticking them off every morning. And what I would like you to do is tell us how you're getting on. So rather than just saying, where can I find you? I want you to tag at Kingsley Dutton on Instagram and Steve, your handle?
At Stephen Collins Training.
At Stephen Collins Training. Tell us how you got on. Tell us if you improved your sleep. Tell us if it made you feel better. Tell us if it improved your productivity. And then tell us how you're getting on during the process. What's the hard times? Tag us. We'd love to know how you're getting on. And we'll, maybe, if we see it, we'll drop you a message and we'll work with you. But Steve, absolute pleasure as always, man. And I'll catch you next week.
Catch you next week, mate. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Self-Made Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Before you go, I've got a little favor to ask you. In order for us to grow the show, get bigger guests, get higher production value, and to get more clips of the show out to you guys, we need your support. So if you could give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. If you prefer to watch your podcast and maybe haven't realized that's an option, head to YouTube and search Simon Kingsley Dutton to subscribe to us there. Also, if you have any further questions about training, nutrition, or just want to chat shop, head to at Kingsley Dutton on Instagram. I'm very active there and happy to answer any and all questions. So until next time, I'll speak to you soon.